All the stories you know and love in a me sort of way, bringing religion, spirituality, and who knows what else.
Listen to the Pastor with the Master battle the thunder from down under.
On Religion, Ho-Ho's Way. Broadcasting from the Cottage Studio, welcome to Religion, Ho-Ho's Way. As always, I'm your host, Ho-Ho. So how y'all's doing? I hope you're doing good. I really do. So, yeah. I do apologize about last week, but unfortunately, my voice completely sucked. And as you can hear, I'm not completely back to 100% yet. So, yeah, there is that. But we have got something to talk about because I'm wanting to go through Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Oh, yeah. It really is a good story. And I tell you what, the entire book of Daniel, which is where the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego can be found in chapter 3, is a good book. It really is. This one year at church camp, we spent like the entire week going through the book of Daniel. And I tell you what, it is an amazing book. It really is. There's so much stuff in there. So many stories. Humor, not humor. I mean, it's a good book. It really is. It's one of the books written by a prophet. You got Daniel, you got Isaiah, you got Jeremiah, and a handful of others. And it really is a good book. It really is a good book. But before we go into Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I kind of got to back it up a little bit. We're actually going to start this one by going through the very beginning. Actually, I want to start off with chapter 1, talking about Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and then getting into chapter 2, which is an amazing part of it, talking about prophecy. And then we're going to get into chapter 3 of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. And that is an amazing story. It really is. So let's go ahead and get into it, going back into Daniel chapter 1. Now this starts off with Nebuchadnezzar taking over and besieging Jerusalem. And King Nebuchadnezzar takes the noblemen, the royal family into custody, and they go through an education type of a thing. They go through a schooling, and I believe this schooling is like 3 years long, if I'm not mistaken. And is what the point is to introduce them, higher ups of the society that was taken over. I mean, this was a common practice back then. This is just how they did things. But it was to incorporate them into the society of that just took them over. So in this case, the society of the Babylonians, I believe. That's what King Nebuchadnezzar was. I think. Oh, holy crap. Hold on a second. Let me get in here and reference it right quick. Daniel chapter 1, right there it is. And yeah. Yep, Babylonia. So that's who King Nebuchadnezzar was. Let me take a drink right quick, actually. Oh yeah, that's some good high quality H2O right there. So common practice back then was whenever one nation took over another one, the leadership of the one that was taken over go through more or less a re-education camp and are familiar with the culture, the language, and everything else of the society that just took them over. That's common practice. That's what they did. And that is what happens here. And one of the things that they were doing was, introducing them into the food as well. And of which case Daniel stood up and he was like, well, I really don't want to defile myself by partaking in the king's food and the wine. I would rather not do that. I would like to honor my God and maintain the diet that is befit of my people. And the guy that kind of overseen this aspect of it was like, hey, look, I understand where you're coming from. I feel your pain. However, I can't allow you to do this, because if you partake in the diet that you're wanting, which was basically a diet that consisted of vegetables and water, not meat, not anything else, just vegetables and water, well, it's not going to look good on me, because, your body is going to start to wither because you don't have the nourishment that your body needs in order to stay strong. And it's going to look negatively on me, and I'm going to be punished for it. And I would rather not go through that, so I apologize, but no. And Daniel didn't just take no for an answer. Now, don't get me wrong. He wasn't, belligerent. He wasn't mean. He was still respectful. And his response was, let's compromise. Give me 10 days. Allow me and some of my people, and my people, and of which case he singled out Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and allow us to, partake in a diet that is befitting of, what we are supposed to be having. And at the end of 10 days, evaluate us and see how good we do. See if our bodies are, any weaker. See if, our stamina, doesn't, survive, that we can still do things, and strength and everything else. Evaluate us at the end of this 10 days. And the guy was like, okay, fine, we can do that. So they did. So you had the other people that were part of this as well, that were partaking of the food from the king's table. That's how they worded it. The king's food, meat, all kinds of other things, wine and everything else. And then you had, Daniel and the other Jews that were partaking only of vegetables and water. Now, I thought that I read this in another area where they were talking, and it was fruits and vegetables, not just vegetables, but in Daniel 1, it just says vegetables. That's it. And at the end of the 10 days, their bodies were not withered. They still had good stamina, good strength. Basically, in short, they passed the test. And, the guy that was overseeing all of this didn't just allow Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and the other, Jews that were there to continue to eat the diet that they had been. He made everybody else start eating the same thing. That is how much of an impact eating the diet prescribed in the Bible. That's how well it did. That's how well they did. That to me says something. I thought that was pretty stinking cool. I really did. And at the end of this 3 years, where they went through and learned about the culture of Babylon and everything else, they were tested on their knowledge, their understanding, their wisdom, and everything else. And the king was so impressed by Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that he made them officials. Okay. Daniel worked out of the royal palace, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were like officials in the district of, I think it was Babylonia, I think. I'm pretty sure. And so that covers the first chapter. So they had to go through the re-education, learn the language, everything else. Wisdom beyond anybody else that was there for Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and of course, Daniel. And then something happened. And I think this took place, if I'm not mistaken, like on the 4th year of King Nebuchadnezzar's rule. At least with over all of it, if I'm not mistaken. So about a year after they got done with their training and everything else, King Nebuchadnezzar had a vision. It was different. It wasn't a dream. This was a vision that was given to him. And this scared the ever-loving crap out of him because it didn't feel like a dream. It felt completely different. It felt real. A dream that in a sense had its own little presence about it. And it really rocked King Nebuchadnezzar's world. How do I know this? Because of what King Nebuchadnezzar did in response to this. Now, apparently, King Nebuchadnezzar did not trust his own advisors because of what ended up happening, because there's a lot of nuance in here. There really is. It's a short chapter, but there's a lot of nuances in here. So let's start it off by talking about what happened. He had this vision, and he goes to his wise men and advisors and mystics, everything else that were in his court. And he goes, I had a vision, and I want you to translate the vision to me. But I'm not going to tell you what the vision was. And they were like, his advisors, his wise men, his mystics, everything else, all the people that were in his court were like, if you tell us what the vision is, then we'll be able to interpret it for you. And he goes, nope, not going to work that way. And if you can't tell me both my vision and the interpretation of that vision, then I'm going to kill all of you. He doesn't trust them. He even said as much. He's like, I know you guys have misled me in the past. What you're doing right now is nothing more than a stalling technique. I'm not impressed. Tell me my vision. Give me the interpretation. And then I'll know that you are wise, that you're getting your information from God. Because apparently, not from God, he doesn't say that. Because apparently King Nebuchadnezzar had an understanding that this was a vision that was given to him by an outside force, and only somebody who is representative of that outside force can interpret that dream. He didn't know that it was the Most High. He didn't know that it was God. He didn't know that it was the God of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He did not know that. And that's why he tested his mystics, his wise men, all of those people that were in his court. They told him, they were like, dude, that what you're asking is impossible. Nobody can do this. Only gods can do this. And gods don't live amongst humans. So there's nobody that can do this. What you're asking is impossible. It can't be done. The king was angry. He was angry. He was upset. He was ticked off. He was not happy. And so he let out the order to kill all of the wise men, the mystics, the people that see the future and everybody else. He ordered that all of them be killed. And he goes into where Daniel is. Not King Nebuchadnezzar, but the person whom, one of the people that was ordered to carry out these commands. And he told him that, hey, I got to kill you. I've been given this order. I've been given this command. I got to carry it out. Unfortunately, this has got to happen. And Daniel goes, well, I'm kind of curious. How did this actually happen? How did this take place? Why is it that this is so strict of a punishment for basically everybody to be put to death whom is one of the wise, whom is, he didn't really say the mystics or anything else, but he's like, why is this such a harsh decree? So the guy had asked, Daniel had asked, why is this punishment so harsh? What happened? And the guy responded with, well, King Nebuchadnezzar had a vision, had a dream, and he wanted that dream to be interpreted, but he wouldn't tell anybody what the vision was. He wanted the vision to be told to him and then the interpretation. And Daniel, having a huge amount of faith, responded with, if you please, give me time. He didn't ask that, that the guy who had to carry out not obey the orders he was given. He just merely asked for a little bit of time. And that night, Daniel went and told Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego what had happened. They prayed about it. And that night, when he slept, Daniel received from God what that vision was that was given to King Nebuchadnezzar and the interpretation. Now, let me stop right there. So obviously the guy who was ordered to carry out the king's request that all of the wise men, the mystics, whatever, be put to death, he didn't want to carry out those orders. And more than likely, these two people knew each other. Because Daniel, again, he worked in the royal palace. So they probably knew each other. Very good possibility of this. And this, again, is why I say that this vision that King Nebuchadnezzar got rocked his world and totally scared the ever-loving crap out of him. Because why else would you have such a decree, such a request from people to translate your dream? And why would you have such a harsh response when the people in his own court were unable to do that? He was angered, and he was scared. He was terrified, shaken to his very core. And so Daniel went back to the king. Well, he went to the guy, and the guy presented him to the king. And the king responds with, the guy goes, hey, I found somebody that can interpret your, that they could tell you what your dream is and interpret said dream. And King Nebuchadnezzar then addresses Daniel and goes, is this true? Can you do this? And Daniel's response was perfect, because he said, nobody can do what you asked. No man can do what you asked. But I serve a God that is Lord of Lords, King of Kings, the whole 9 yards. He goes to the seal. And he has told me what your vision is and the interpretation of said vision. And he tells him what the vision is. And the vision was of a big statue that was made of gold at the head. The arms and abdomen was of something else. The thighs and the hips were of something else, and the feet and the calves were made of something else. Mainly the feet and the toes and whatnot were made of something else. And in the vision, a rock was cut out of a mountain, fell on the statue. The statue crumbled to pieces, and then not a bit of the remains, the pieces of said statue even remained. And again, this thing felt so real. This rocked King Nebuchadnezzar's world. It really did. It rocked him to his core. And then he gave the interpretation of said vision and said that, you are the head of gold. Your house will go through, or your kingdom will have 3 more leaders after you. The last one will be split. A kingdom that God has put in place will destroy it, and nothing of your kingdom will remain after this happens. Not necessarily a good prophecy. It really isn't. And that's one of the takeaways that I want to give you on this. Not all prophecies are positive. There's a reason why Jeremiah was classified as the weeping prophet, because not all prophecies are positive. Anybody that says otherwise either has not read the Bible, has not read a book that one of the prophets wrote, or isn't a prophet. But what happens next is the redeeming quality of the prophet, of the prophecy. Because King Nebuchadnezzar, upon hearing all of it, the dream that was given by God to Daniel and the interpretation of said vision, King Nebuchadnezzar acknowledged the power of God, of Daniel's God, acknowledged it, and promoted even higher Daniel's stature, and upon Daniel's request, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And the kind of faith that this had to have taken for Daniel to, not just accept the doom that had knocked on his door, but to operate in faith that God would answer the prayer and their lives would be saved, was awesome. It was amazing. It really was. It definitely shows, that God is, of course, an all-powerful God. And now we get into Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego go into the fiery furnace, because sometime after that happened, the king had built a statue that was like 90 some odd cubits high, and whatever the dimensions are laid out in the Bible, it doesn't matter the dimensions, but made this big old statue, this big old image. I don't remember what it was made out of, probably out of gold, but I don't even know. And he decreed upon completion of said statue that when any musical instrument is played, the people are supposed to bow down and worship the statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had made. And it's like, this was after God had demonstrated through Daniel his superiority in the kingdom. So why is it that King Nebuchadnezzar sometime later fell from that understanding, that moment of enlightenment? It's like, dude, what gives? Now, I really can't be surprised, especially whenever you take into consideration what had happened during the Exodus with with the Hebrew nation, with the 10 plagues of Egypt, crossing of the Red Sea, being fed from heaven, water coming out of a rock, all these miracles that took place after that. And then whenever Moses comes back after communing with God and bringing down the 10 commandments, they make for themselves a golden calf and are worshiping this calf. It's like, dude, why are you worshiping a calf? God just demonstrated his power through 10 plagues, all kinds of miracles, and here you are praising and worshiping a calf. This makes no sense. What the heck is wrong with you people? So, I mean, I can't be surprised with King Nebuchadnezzar falling from grace like that and building this statue, ordering people to worship the statue after any musical instrument has been played. And he ordered if anybody violates that decree, they be killed. Holy crap. So, you had 3 people, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who specifically did not follow that decree, get down on their knees and worship the statue whenever the musical instruments were being played. And then one of the, whomever the guy was, that apparently didn't like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, noticed that they weren't worshiping when the music was being played, and they went to the king and said, hey, didn't you decree that if a person did not bow down and worship the image upon the playing of a musical instrument, that they would be put to death? And the king goes, yeah, yes, I did decree that. And the guy said, well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are not worshiping your image. Well, the king was kind of upset about this. And he had Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego summoned to him. And he said, hey, so I heard something. That there were people that are not bowing down and worshiping the image. Let me stop right there. Because it's interesting that he didn't ask, or at least not in Scripture, if Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had been doing that. Instead, he just reiterated, this is what my command is, this is what the punishment is, and he gave them an opportunity to bow down and worship. He said, I'm going to go ahead and have the musicians play some music. If you get down and worship, then no harm will become you. You will not be harmed. But if you do not, then you will be put to death, and no one will be able to save you from my hands. And apparently God took that as a challenge accepted. Because how Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego responded was so much out of faith, maybe even possibly desperation. But they responded with, hey, it's like, I apologize, but I cannot bow down and worship your image that you have had made. I can't do it. Because my God is a powerful God. He is a jealous God. He told me that we are not supposed to worship any other image. We are not supposed to worship anything other than him. So I cannot do that. God has proven his superiority. He has proven himself time and time again to people of my nation. the crossing of the Red Sea, so many different things that has happened that they knew about. And God has demonstrated in their own lives already. And they refused to budge. They said, no, we will not bow down and worship the image that you have made. Because our God has the power to save us. But even if he doesn't, then we will still lay down our lives in service to our God. And King Nebuchadnezzar was infuriated. He was enraged. He was like, oh, no, you didn't. And he had his furnace heated up. The scripture says 7 times its normal temperature. Now, one of the things from my understanding is that is basically a numerical representation for it was heated up to 100% capacity. It was made as hot as that thing could possibly get, because 7 is the number of God. It's the number of perfection, the number of completion. So for something to be heated up 7 times its normal temperature means that it was heated up to its absolute hottest temperature, that it can't get any hotter than that. Let me take a drink real quick. Now, I don't know how much of that is true, but either way you look at it, that puppy was heated up hot. And I mean hot. Because once this sucker got to its full temperature, once it got heated up to where King Nebuchadnezzar wanted it, he ordered them bound, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered them seized, of course, and then thrown into the fiery furnace. And that furnace was heated up so hot that once that door opened to the furnace, the people that were holding him and that had bound Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego died instantly. The heat was so intense that it killed them. Now, I don't know if it was 1 or 2 people per prisoner. I don't know. It doesn't say. But at any rate, they all died. And then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego fell into the fiery furnace. Now, this is where it gets entertaining. Because you've got the door still open, mind you. And the king's kind of looking inside, and he's looking in, and he sees 4 people walking around inside the fiery furnace. He's like, huh. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. That's 3 people. He looks in there, 1, 2, 3, 4. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. I'm seeing 4 people in there. What the heck? So he calls out to a guy that's next to him and goes, hey, how many people did we throw into the fiery furnace? And the guy's like, it just happened. You were there. 3 people. 3 people were thrown into the fiery furnace. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. There's only 3 people. What the heck? They had to have been looking at King Nebuchadnezzar like he was some kind of crazy to be asking that question just moments after they were thrown in. And he goes, well, you tell me 3 people were thrown in, but I'm counting 4 people walking around in there, and one of them appears to be like the Son of God. Then he calls in there to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and goes, hey, come on out. I want to talk to you for a minute. So they climb out of the fiery furnace. And the people of the king's court were there, and they inspected Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And what they found was truly mind-boggling, impossible. Because not a single hair on their head or body was singed. No marks on them. No blisters. Their skin had literally not been touched by the fire, by the heat, by the flame. The clothes that they were wearing were not scorched in any way. The bindings were off, but their hair was not singed, their clothing was not scorched, their skin was perfectly unharmed. Not only that, they did not even smell of the fire. That amazes me. Because, dude, like I've been around a campfire. You know, how many people out there have been around a campfire? I'm sure that quite a few of us have. It does not take long of standing in front of a fire to smell like the fire. It don't take long. It don't take long at all. It really don't. Now, the scripture isn't clear on how much time passes between them falling into the furnace and then climbing back out. But I would imagine that it wasn't very much time at all. I mean, I just imagine that. I mean, how much time does it take for them to fall in, for the king to look in and notice that there's 4 people instead of 3, holler at him to climb back out, and for them to climb back out? I wouldn't think that that would take all that much time. And upon climbing out, not singed, clothing not scorched, their skin entirely untouched, not even smelling of smoke. That is, holy crap, absolutely amazing. And the king, sorry about that. But the king is so amazed, impressed over what had just happened. He acknowledges, again, that the God of Daniel, the God of Shadrach and of Meshach and Abednego, was truly an all-powerful God. Because they had never seen anything like that before. So yeah, they were truly impressed by what had happened. Now, a takeaway, whenever I had heard this story that was given to me, this is not an original thought by me, this is something that was said to me. You got to take another drink. But it was, all right, let's put it like this. Okay, let me talk with you for a second. Faith is like a fire that burns within us. Okay? Passion, if you will, and passion is like a flame. It's been described that by numerous people, poets, what have you, that they describe passion as a fire, and the same thing has been said about faith. It is a fire, something that consumes us. And if you have a faith of a passion that is that deep, that is that strong, unyielding, unquestioning, a child's like faith that just believes because it's what should be. I've talked about that in previous episodes. But if you have that kind of faith, that much passion and that kind of fire that burns within you, then, well, let me just say it like this. If the fire that burns within you is hotter, stronger and more powerful than the fire of the environment you are thrown into, then you will not be consumed by that fire. And that's why they were unharmed. By grace, through faith. The fire that burned within them was hotter than the furnace of King Nebuchadnezzar, heated 7 times past its normal temperature. That is amazing. Holy crap, that's amazing. That is so cool. Their level of faith that they had to have, the understanding in the scripture that they had, the knowledge that they had, the stories that they were told about the awesome wonders, the things that their God has done for their people, that they didn't even question whether God could save them. Because that wasn't even a question that popped into their mind. It's like, yeah, God could save us from this, but I don't know if he will. And even if he doesn't, it doesn't matter. I still choose to honor my God and to be thrown into the fiery furnace. Wow. How amazing is that? That is so cool. That is so cool. But I want to back up a little bit and talk about something, because I kind of got into this a little bit earlier, talking about prophets and the prophetic. Not all prophecies are good. Look at King Nebuchadnezzar's prophecy, that vision that he had. It wasn't a good one, because it was still talking about things to come, that no matter what King Nebuchadnezzar did, his kingdom was still going to be destroyed. There wasn't anything positive to be had by King Nebuchadnezzar in that vision. Nothing. But the wonder of God wasn't in the vision itself. And it wasn't even in the interpretation that was given to him through Daniel by God. But it was the King Nebuchadnezzar was introduced to the God of Israel, the God of Daniel, the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And through being introduced to God through them, God's wonders that there had to have been, and the Bible even speaks of it, that God was honored through that. I don't know how long it lasted, because King Nebuchadnezzar had other visions that were given to him, other dreams that disturbed him, other things that happened that rocked his world. This wasn't, this was the first, but it certainly wasn't the last. And the positive didn't come out of the dream. The positive didn't come out of the interpretation. The positive came out of the reaction. Read Daniel. Read some of the other books on the prophetic. It's not an easy life to live, especially whenever you read the book of Jeremiah. It's not an easy thing to be a prophet. It really isn't. Jeremiah is referred to as the weeping prophet because what he's seen disturbed him so much. Being connected in that way to the Spirit, being interlinked with the Spirit, interlinked with God, to have things downloaded to you that just aren't downloaded to everybody, that aren't given to everybody, and to try to communicate to other people what is being said. I mean, dude, I couldn't even imagine what it would have been like for Daniel to receive that vision having no clue. Because, I mean, it wasn't him that was able to interpret that dream that King Nebuchadnezzar had. God had to tell him what that thing meant, because he was like, I don't understand that. God gave him the vision, and he also had to give to him the interpretation, because it was that, like, how am I supposed to understand this? A vision that went beyond even Daniel's understanding. He had to be given the information by God. Awesome stuff, it really is. So there you go. Your introduction into Daniel. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, what it is like as a prophet. And definitely read some of the other books on prophecies, because there's like 5 or 6 of them, if I'm not mistaken, maybe a few more. I don't completely remember. But read those books, because what they talk about are things that are important, things that has happened, and things that are yet to come. That's what's talked about in those books, because not all of it's come to pass yet. We still have things that were prophesied in the Old Testament that has yet to come. It's yet to come. And these people, these prophets, some of them, even like Isaiah, dreamed in a good way from the outpouring of the power of the Holy Spirit of the days to come. Not just the time of Jesus, which they also were prophesied, which was also told to them by God, but of things yet to come. That is amazing to me. Being that far removed from what they are prophesying or what they are being told by God. It's like, wow. Wow. So guys, that is all I got for you today. That's it. I appreciate you all stopping by and for joining. If there's any other story you would like for me to talk about, just let me know down in the comments, or actually you're better off just emailing me, hoho@thehohoshow.com. That'd be the best way. And hopefully next time we talk, I got my voice back. That's what I'm hoping for. So y'all have yourself a great one. Till next time. Thank you for listening to Religion Ho-Ho's Way. For a complete listing of episodes and shows, you can head to thehohoshow.com and click on the episode tab. See you next time.